Welcome, beautiful, beloved beings. I apologize for how I look today, but I needed to get this recorded before I forgot it. I have a story about my son and how sometimes we pass things off as coincidence, but they're really spirit talking to us or talking to them or through them. So some of you know my son is disabled. I was run over by a car when I was 5 months pregnant, and he was born 2 months later at 31 weeks. And he had brain damage. He has cerebral palsy. I had some other medical problems, and he more than likely sustained some brain damage from that, as well as me being struck by a car physically. Now, he didn't speak for 4 years. He didn't have the ability to speak. And when he did finally talk, he spoke complete sentences. So he had obviously been learning language. He just hadn't been able to express it. He saw things, and I was vaguely aware of it. At the time, I was in complete denial and was attempting to squash, bury, cover up my abilities, and was actively ignoring them. So I passed these things off as coincidences. Now, my child was born 6 years after my mother passed away. And yet he still has, many of her mannerisms and expressions, facial expressions, verbal expressions. The biggest thing, though, when he was small, was that he had to have a lot of surgeries and medical procedures and durable medical equipment. So, in order to explain these things to a small child, I made for him a Raggedy Andy type doll. Fabric, body, and yarn for hair. And this little doll had all the surgeries and procedures and medical equipment that my child had, and all the scars and all of the implants and internal stuff that my child has, up until the time when he didn't need that aid anymore. And I don't know what happened to that doll, because my child and I were separated for a time. He lived with his dad and his stepmom. And so I don't know what happened to that particular doll. But he had this doll that I had made. And this doll would have surgeries before he had surgery, so that he would know what to expect. It had scars where he was going to have scars. Everything that he went through, this doll also experienced. So when he received this doll, I can't remember if he got it before he started to talk or not, but when he started to talk, he named this doll Sonny Boy. Now, it's not an ordinary name that a small child might call a doll that they have. But what's interesting about this name is that it was the nickname that my great-grandmother called my granddad. She called him Sonny Boy his entire life. And both of them had passed away some years before my son was born. And for some strange reason, he called this doll the nickname that my great-grandmother called my granddad his entire life. And so I passed these things that were obviously striking similarities off as coincidence at the time. Now, over the years, my ex passed away 11, maybe 12 years ago. And my son tells me he sees him, and in some cases speaks to him, or he speaks to my son. And I've always believed that was actually happening, that he did experience that. And later on, when I could no longer deny things beyond my realm of understanding were happening, and started to embrace it and learn about it, then I had an experience where I met one of my guides, or someone who expressed that he was one of my guides, that he doesn't come very often, but he comes when I need support or when I'm in need of comfort or that sort of thing. And he's an elderly African American gentleman, and I recognized him as being someone who was in my child's life when he was very small. At school, my son always had an assistant, a personal assistant, that would hand over hand help him write, help him feed himself, or would actually feed him, or whatever his needs are during the day that he can't do for himself, which is most everything, this personal assistant would do. And over the years, he had a good number. And a few of them I know have passed away. And this was his first personal assistant, this elderly man. And at the time, my ex's dad was no longer living, and my dad lived in another state. So my child had, and both of our mothers were deceased. So my child had no grandparents. And this man was kind and loving and was like a surrogate grandparent to my son. And so when I learned that this being comes to me, I asked if he was mostly attached to my son, and he said yes. So he is really one of my son's guides, helpers. And so I'm reasonably sure that my son sees him. He may not remember who he is because he was quite young. He was around 3 years old when this man was part of his life. But I'm fairly confident he's aware of him, whether he knows who he is or not. So, when this story came to my mind yesterday, and I thought about it, I thought this is a story I need to share. I need to talk about how things aren't always coincidence. If it seems too good to be true, that it's such a strong, striking similarity, it's not a coincidence. It is Spirit acting through and for and with whatever the situation is, whether it's a person, whether it's you, whether it's something going on. If it seems to fit too well, it's because it was meant to fit well. It's meant to be part of the experience. It's meant as a signpost to show you that there are things beyond what we can see with our physical eyes. So that's my story. At the time, like I said, I tried to ignore it or pass it off as just coincidence or maybe hereditary traits or that sort of thing. So what I wanted to do was bring you that story and tell you that those are signs and symbols that we need to pay attention to. Someone is trying to get our attention when those things happen, or they're assisting with the life path. Very often, though, it's a sign from our loved ones on the other side, letting us know that they're still there and they're still helping us and still involved in our lives, that they want us to do well. So I have a couple of decks here. I'm going to have ask my guides, but also my ancestors and my whole spirit team, but I'd like for my ancestors to step forward and talk about this phenomenon, that especially with children, who children are so much more open than we are. They don't make excuses, and they don't try to make things go away just because they don't seem logical or out of the ordinary. They just accept what's happening. So I want to ask, firstly, my ancestors to come forward and help explain what can we learn from these sorts of encounters. And what I got was, I should have brought my glasses with me, the Magician. All of those things in the other realm, across the veil, that are available to us, have been available to them, and they know how to use them. They know how to interweave into our lives and give us the message that we need. Even if we don't recognize that it's from them, we will generally get the message. We may not recognize who it's from, but they know how to give us that message. The Six of Cups. Remembering, hanging on to what's in the past. They know all the secrets. They have all of the family lore at their disposal. They can bring forward those secrets and manifest them in other ways. The Seven of Wands. I really love this Seven of Wands. To me, it doesn't necessarily represent active struggle. It represents the struggle in the past, or the struggle to see, maybe, clearly, to clearly see what's occurring. Get to the high ground so you can look at what has happened and see for yourself, what does it mean? Who is it from? How can it help me? Maybe it already has helped you and you're just needing to see. The Knight of Pentacles on the bottom, the overall feeling of the reading is that those on the other side are plodding along, doing what they do, being involved with us, not interfering, but being involved. And they do it at a slow pace. And we see it at a slow pace. So they are always there, underlying, giving us what we need. Riding along on that horse with everything that they have in the past, and knowing how to interject it in a way that will be helpful to us or comforting to us, or whatever it is that they see that we need at the time. And with my son, it could be that he was isolated and unable to communicate with us here, but he could communicate with them, and they could communicate with him. And I really feel like he was learning as much from them. They were supporting him as much as we were here on this plane, and trying to help him to be and become whatever he was able to be, and whatever he continues to be able to be. He's not quite as isolated as he was, as far as being able to speak or communicate or having a life of his own. He still is quite dependent on people to help him, and he can't sit up on his own. He can't roll over. He can't feed himself. He can't do any of those sorts of physical things. But his mind still works, and he has conversations all the time. He has interests, and he has a life of his own, and is as independent as he can be. So, and I think that they helped him and continue to help him. And he has his own spirit team. Now, they interact with mine because it was always a necessity, and it continues to be a necessity. But he is as independent with their help as he can be. So I'm going to ask one more question from the angels, the ancestors and angels, and this is just generally, what do we learn from this sort of situation? And well, two cards wanted to come from there. Okay. What we learned. The fire guardian. Ignite your passion. So they are with us. Not pushing, but guiding toward the things we are passionate about. If there's something you love, don't wait. Do it. What's stopping you? The arrow, surround yourself with protective energy, and that is exactly what they are doing. They are surrounding us with protection as much as we allow them. And we can ask them to help us protect ourselves and to help strengthen the protections we have. These two came out together, the air guardian and the sage. The air guardian is shift your perception. Pay attention. Notice when those signs are there. Notice when they're trying to get you to move a certain way or to move away from something. The sage says to be devoted and committed. And that's what they are. They're devoted and committed to making us successful. Now, I think it's really interesting that I got two guardians, the fire guardian and the air guardian, in this reading. So they are intensely working at guarding us and being our guardians and using our thoughts and getting into our head to help steer us in a direction that is beneficial for us. They would never steer us in a way that would be harmful. Our ancestors and guardians would not do that. And on the bottom of the deck, take care of your needs, the winter. So they are helping us to take care of ourselves. They're showing us the path that would be most beneficial. They come to help us because they love us. They have the benefit of seeing things on a wider, grander scale than we can because we are confined to this plane. And they know the hardships that not only they have been through, but that we are going through. And they're very, very happy and available to help us at all times. If only we see the signs and accept what they're offering. So, until next time, beloved, beautiful being.